Just seals the aircraft up, keeps dust and dirt, and he doesn't critters from wanting to make a home in there. The second coat is white. What that does is reflect heat and keeps the interior cockpit about 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the outside ambient temperature. Those protect avionics and that kind of thing. When they take it off the aircraft, it peels off just like saran wrap would in your kitchen. It's very flexible, and I'll pass it around so everybody can get a feel for it. Okay, coming up on the right side of the bus is the F-16 Fighting Falcon. It's a Mach 2 multi-role fighter. It's a 20mm Gatling gun. It carries a wide variety of air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions. Notice that some of the cockpits are short, some are long. The short cockpit is the A model. This is the single-seat tactical version of the aircraft. And the long cockpit, the aircraft we're right alongside here, number 812 there, is the B model. That's the two-seat training model, also known as the station wagon model, or the family model. The aircraft you're looking at right there, 812, is near and dear to my heart because I crewed that airplane for several years. As far as I know, it's the only F-16 to have father and son both flying the same F-16 fighter. You notice that the aircraft have state tails on them. All these aircraft come from different Air National Guard units around the country and have not been replaced by the newer C and D models. About 21 to 23% of these aircraft will return to active flying service with friendly foreign governments. Currently there are 32 friendly foreign governments that are buying aircraft out of Boneyard here, and so that's how the number of aircraft here varies from time to time. Over on the left-hand side of the bus, you see and this will give the aircraft about another 9,000 hours of flying time. Keep it in the inventory now to about 2030. We'll talk more about the A-10 a little bit later in our tour.
A lot of A-10s there.
Here's the latex that they put on the plane.
Oh, where did you put it?
They're passing it around.
Oh, that's up like it.
Again, coming up on the left-hand side of the bus, you see a whole bunch of pylons here.
Well,
These are B-52 pylons. They're carrying cruise missiles. Each one of those
see all that
pylons
white
carries
stuff
6
that's on
missiles.
it?
That's latex.
That's that latex. They put black on it and
They
then
also
they
have
put
a
the
rotary
white on
device
it.
in the bomb bay, giving each
And it peels off like that.
cruise missiles.
But it keeps the planes cooler and protects
These
them.
pylons, all the B-52s now have been retired except for the H model. So these, so I'm going to be talking about aircraft on both sides of the bus, so I'll be kind of yanking and banking you back and forth here a little bit. As I mentioned, in 1965, the government decided that all government aircraft, or DoD aircraft, would be stored here at Davis Monthan Center because of the sound of its engines. It also carries bombs, torpedoes, and sonobuoys, and they're very successful anti-submarine warfare aircraft for the Navy. Staying on the right, the next aircraft up is the C-1 freighter. It's very much like the C-2 we just looked at, but a very different mission. Again, late 1940s for the Navy. This aircraft is what they call a COD, COD, Carrier Onboard Delivery. It flies out from land bases to the aircraft carrier, delivering personnel that need to be moved around, aircraft parts, and of course, most importantly, the mail. This aircraft has also been replaced now by a twin turboprop aircraft. Back on the left, we have the Navy's SH-60F Seahawk. This is just the Navy's version of the Seahawk that we're used to seeing on the news and the movies nowadays. They call it the Black Hawk. Back on the right, we have the C-131 Samaritan, flown by the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. We use it for transporting personnel and hauling cargo. The aircraft came out in the early 1950s. And it's been every single seat and the two-seat version. It has 20mm cannon, carries a wide variety of air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions. This aircraft has the best air-to-air victory record of any aircraft in aviation history. So far, it's shot down over 100 enemy aircraft with 0 losses to the Eagle. This aircraft is a mainstay in the Air Force today and will remain that way if we didn't want to advertise where we're going. Coming up on two that we just saw back down the street there. 4-inch turboprop.
It's for landing out of ice and snow.
Scientific
Skis on
stations down there. Remember the lady doctor that had breast cancer that they pulled out of there a few years ago? They took pretty
Some
sure.
nice shots of the bombers here.
Down to the left.
I'm on the wrong side of the
Next
pass.
aircraft
So
up
the fighter
to
planes
DC-4C.
are on the wrong side.
Remember we were talking about the A6 a few minutes ago? I said, pay attention to the nose. We're going to see another airplane with the same nose but totally different. And again, save us taxpayers a lot of money by
Guys often have stuff going on like
train about 8 bombardier navigators at a time. The reason for the nose on the aircraft is so it gave the same fire control system that the A6 had, so they could use it basically just like an A6 would. Again, the A6 has gone out of business now, so has the DC-4C. For public relations purposes, for the 50th anniversary of the Air Force, to represent Captain Steve Ritchie's airplane. Notice the 5 red stars there on the intake, indicating the 5 North Vietnamese MiGs that he shot down. This airplane, again, is one of the workhorses that does about everything. And as an interceptor, bomber, it's been a wonderful airplane. This airplane came out in 1961, first purchased by the Navy. Later on, the Air Force, when we started getting involved in Vietnam, started buying the C model and different models on it. They're bringing these back about 3 every 18 months here at AMARC, and they're going to be called QF-4s, unmanned supersonic drones, the Q-wings. So what happens here at AMARC? And they're then flown to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico or Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. I'm most familiar with the ones at Tyndall where they get about 200 missions out of them before they fly them by remote control out over the Gulf of Mexico, and the aircraft is then shot down in a live missile chute. So it winds up in the bottom of the Gulf. His only job in life is to pass gas. There's still a lot of KC-135s out there yet, and between that and the KC-10, the Air Force has been talking now. They're still trying to decide on a new aircraft to replace both of them, but they haven't, as far as I know, haven't come up with an answer to that yet. These helicopters you see here, you notice their rotors are gone. The materials that the rotors are made out of nowadays for helicopters don't hold up very well out here. They arrive and when they depart, it takes the spray lat off and gets them all back into flying service. You see a couple of C-130s in there that have no prenom. That's another job that AMARC just picked up a couple of years ago from Hill Air Force Base. It's called PDM maintenance, periodic dock maintenance. And they got a little overwhelmed there, Hill. So a couple of years ago, we took over all the overflow. If you look out to the right there, you see some very large cargo aircraft out there. Those are C-5 Galaxies. We have 13 of those here now. They're being used to supply parts to the current C-5 fleet. The aircraft you see over on this side of the field will never fly again, because most of them are being used to supply parts to the current fleets. The aircraft, the AMARC area here, they buy these aircraft and they scrap them out and sell the metal and the wiring and that kind of thing, and that's how they make their living with that. These F-4s over here on the right, again being used to supply parts to the QF-4s that are coming back into service. We get up here behind the B-1B bombers. We're going to stop again for just a second. Talk a little bit about START. In 1994, we signed an agreement with the Russians called START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, where the Russians and us both agreed to dispose of a lot of our nuclear-capable inventories. That included the ICBM missiles that we saw back down the street. But the aircraft that it most affected was, of course, the B-52. Like I said, all the B-52s have been retired now except for the H model. If you look way, way down to the right there, you see B-52 that's been cut up and laying on the ground there. They used to use a 13,000-pound guillotine, would chop the wings off, chop the fuselage into 3 pieces. But they figured out very quickly that they were destroying a lot of parts that they could use for the B-52H. So now they use what looks like a big, huge skill saw. But the result is the same. They cut the wings off, they cut the fuselage into 3 pieces. The aircraft then lays on the ground for 120 days to allow the Russian satellites to fly over here and photograph them, make sure that we're keeping our end of the bargain. And we also do the same thing to them, wherever their little lane mark is. Now, once a year, they send a contingent of folks over here that walk around, take pictures, write serial numbers down. It's funny, they always show up in this winter in Moscow. Can't imagine why. As we go along, keep looking out to the right there. You'll see B-52s that are waiting to be cut up, and then some more that have. The B-1s you see here on the right side, again, are real early model B-1s that are being used to supply parts to the current B-1 fleet.
Well, there's a lot of B-52s back there.
Some of the real early model F-18s here on the right. Have F-111s on both sides. Again, these aircraft were being used to supply parts to the Royal Australian Air Force up until about 2 months ago. Coming up on the right is the C-141. You can see several of them here that have just been chopped up. That's just been done here in the last week. C-141 has now been replaced by the C-17. These aircraft were just tired and worn out. They've been a mainstay for the Air Force for cargo and paratrooper and people hauling for years and years. They had thousands of hours on them. But they are doing one last great donation while they're here. They're giving up their engines. They're being put into those engine cans I mentioned. Because the B-52H uses exactly the same engine, and so it'll keep the B-52s in fresh engines. But you can see how they cut these C-141s up, and then they load them up on those 18-wheelers, and then they go off to the junkyard dealer, whoever purchased them.
These are cool looking. Chopped up.
Once we get past these A-10s here on the right, you'll get a real good look at the B-52s down there. They're awaiting destruction, and quite a few of them have already been cut up. We're going to be making a U-turn here. And as we make our U-turn, you're going to see two large storage areas out here with a lot of gray equipment and white boxes out there. As we start our turn, the first group that you'll see is a lot of the jigs and equipment, tooling necessary to build the B-2 bomber. In fact, you can see the outline of the cockpit there, right there on the front corner. And as we complete our turn here, the second group is the same type of equipment for building the B-1. When they took the B-1 and B-2 both out of production, they took all this tooling and equipment from the manufacturer to store out here in case they ever wanted to put them back into production. It would save us taxpayers millions and millions of dollars not to have to buy all that equipment again. It would also put the aircraft back into production fairly quickly. As you can see, on these KC-135s, they remove the parts that can be used on other aircraft very surgically. Coming up on the right, you see a whole bunch of civilian 707s. These 707s were real early models that belonged to different companies and some airlines. The environmental folks said they were putting out too much pollution and they were getting structurally unsafe. So they were stuck with them. The Air Force, being the great guys that they are, they said, we'll give you $800,000 apiece for each airplane. Well, those folks were more than happy to take that to get them off their hands. So far, each one of those aircraft has delivered over $4 million in parts for KC-135s. So I think we got a pretty good deal out of it. It's really sad when you see that big cruncher going over on those 141s, chopping them up the way they do. For those of us that like airplanes, it's kind of hard to watch. That pretty much concludes the narrated portion of our tour. We're going to head on back to the museum now. And as promised, I'll open it up for questions if you have any questions. If they do, I have not seen them out here. The wheels stick down through those skis. So that they can land in ice or snow and also on a bare runway without a problem. question that he asked folks was, how do they land the ski-equipped C-130s on just a bare runway with those skis on? Any other questions? Between 4,000 and 5,000. Currently, the last number I saw just here a few weeks ago was 4,300.
Your tour bus returns from the Boneyard at the Premier Air and Space Museum, same place you started from. And that particular museum is a really great place. It has some neat airplanes there and some other vehicles you might want to see, like the Jeep, and it's got a hangar there and has aircraft inside the hangar, and a lot of the aircraft are out in the yard. So it depends what time of the year you go. It'd be a good time to see everything there. Anyway, the Boneyard tour was excellent. I really enjoyed this trip, and I would definitely recommend it. Thank you. The end.